Hey there, it's Jean here with Waldorf-Inspired Learning, and today I want to give you a taste of a coaching call with me. So I'm the homeschooling mother of 3 almost grown children, and now I get to mentor homeschooling parents just like you. So inside a couple of my programs, I offer coaching, group coaching calls in my new Homeschool with Waldorf community that just opened up this month. We do these once a month. And so I just wanted to give you an idea of what that's like and to answer some questions here. So here's how I usually do this. I collect calls, right, from participants ahead of time, or people can come on live and ask questions here. I don't do it on Facebook, I do it in an online platform called Zoom. But I just wanted to come on here today and invite you to join me for this and just get an idea of what it's like. So I did collect a few questions ahead of time, and I asked here and in one of my groups. I have a private Facebook group for people who have worked with me or are working with me, and I collect questions ahead of time. And what I like to do is sometimes they'll be kind of grouped together, which is something that happened this time, which is really cool, where there'll be some similar questions on similar topics. And then I group those together and do sort of a little mini training on them and offer some insights. And then I also take live questions as well. So that's exactly how we're going to do it today. And the questions that I got today are kind of grouped in 3 categories. So the first one is middle school, right? I often say, beware of the feeling of it's time to get serious now, because when we start to feel that way, we can get kind of crazy, right? And overly heavy-handed with our children. It happens to all of us when you start middle school and when your kids are getting ready for high school. Okay, so then so I'd love to know if you can see and hear me, because a couple people are saying that they can't, but I know some people can, so I'm going to keep going. Facebook can be weird. Yesterday, all my videos were doing weird things, so hopefully this is working for you. So, all right, one category is middle school. Another category is kindergarten, and most specifically, how do you do kindergarten at home when you also have children in the grades? That can be a super challenging experience, right? Oh, good. I'm getting the thumbs up. And then the last category I have today is homeschooling multiple ages. And I'm not getting probably the question that I get asked the most. In the past 5 years that I've been doing this, like that question comes up a lot. So I'm going to answer those 3 questions. And then those of you who are here live, you can also ask me some questions right here in the group. Okay, so I am going to go for 30 minutes. I may not get to all the questions, but this is just going to get you a feel for how this goes. Okay, so the very first question is about middle school. And I had actually 2 people submit something similar. And so I'm going to read you little snippets of the question, the original question, because I think this will really be enlightening as I delve into this. So the first question started off, can you describe how a middle school main lesson should go? Like, what does it look like? And then I feel like the main lesson format has grown boring for all of us. It can happen to everybody. I think especially if we do that, present on one day, draw, day 2, review, and write a summary. If you do that for all 8 years, from 1st through 8th grade, and do it exactly the same, it definitely gets old. So we need to mix it up a little bit, right? Okay, so then it's gotten kind of boring, and I want to give the kids more independence. This is the question. Instead of always assigning them their work or giving them passages to copy. And how do I bridge that gap? How do I make the transition, right, to more independent learning? So the very first thing I want to say is, fabulous that you're asking this. This came from both Carly and Merritt, asked a very similar question about, I have a 7th grader, how do I deliver a main lesson in an engaging way? And the very first thing I want to remind all of us is, what's our goal? Our goal is independent learners, right? So eventually, I mean, that's what we want. We want independent learners, creative thinkers, children who become lifelong learners, so that when they are young adults and adults and they become curious about something, they can learn how to do it, right? My oldest son, Isaac, is decided that he bought his first house last summer, and he's in Colorado, and they don't have a garage. And so he decided, well, I'm going to build a garage. So literally, like, he's never built anything before. He learned how to pour a foundation. He has some subcontractors too. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that we want to see, right? We want to see our children engage with life and become very independent in their learning. How do we do that? So in middle school, I always say, like, around 5th, 6th grade, it's a great idea to begin to build in some independent projects. And I think it really works well to call them challenges. This is something that I'm pretty sure that I learned from Eric Fairman. He wrote the Path of Discovery series. They're really great. He was an Australian Waldorf classroom teacher, and he took notes on, his work. So he would offer up, a challenge to his students each block, I think starting in about 5th grade. And it's really great to give children choice, begin to give them choice in the matter. And maybe in the beginning it's just 2 choices. But you want to say, okay, say you're doing a block on, I'm going to use the Middle Ages as an example, because I have a book that I want to mention. So say you're doing a block on the Middle Ages, you could invite them to explore a subject within the Middle Ages that they're really curious about and interested in, that they could do a little research on and do some sort of project. So it could be more of a typical research project, but it could also be a piece of art, original art, or a piece of original writing. They could write a poem. They could, all kinds of things. In terms of writing, when we think about the main lesson book summary, it's really good to begin to introduce students to the idea, how in the earlier grades, we share a story, and then together we collectively compose a summary from that story, and they write that into their main lesson book. Well, as they get older, by middle school, you want to be able to encourage them to take, to summarize from multiple sources. So maybe you go to the library and they get some books on whatever the topic is, if it's the Middle Ages, and read a little bit from each of them, and then create their own summary from that. It never happens all at once. We can't go from, we've been doing the main lesson blocks in this way, and they've been writing in their main lesson books, and then suddenly it's like, okay, you're on your own, kid. It doesn't work like that. But we can gradually, over a couple years' time, invite them to do some independent learning. When each of my kids was around this age, we had something in our homeschooling community, like the eclectic homeschooling community. We had something called potluck presentations. And once a month, we would get together with other homeschooling families, and all the kids of all ages would present something in front of a group, which is a really good skill also for children to develop. And so kids as young as, 6 and 7 would recite a poem or play a piece of music, or anything. It's a really fun sharing environment, because another thing about this is you want there to be a deadline, right? So that children have to finish the project or the challenge. So those are just some ways that you can begin to invite more independent learning. And remember, it's a process. For sure, it's a process. The librarian, your local librarian, can be your very best friend, because what you want to eventually do, and all kids at different ages, like some young kids are happy doing this, but some kids, even when they're 13, won't do this. You want them to be able to go up to a librarian and say, I'm studying this particular topic, or I'm exploring this particular topic. Can you help me find some books on it? Like, that's a huge step in and of itself. Okay, so yeah, so cultivating some kind of monthly gathering with friends, even if it's like cousins, an extended family, or other homeschoolers, or whatever it is, fabulous thing to do, and begin to encourage more independent learning. And then Merritt also asked, do you know of any great resources for this age? So I will say that one of the first things that came to mind is go check out my Waldorf Homeschooling Simplified. So it's it's like the primer on Waldorf homeschooling, and in the back it has all my favorite resources for every single block of every grade. There is a particular book, I'm just recalling this, because when I started thinking about the Middle Ages, there's a book called Starry Messenger by Peter Siss. It's about Galileo. And so what this reminded me of, it's a children's book. So even in middle school, even in high school, even as adults, I suggest people start in the children's section, because those books have such great, concise summaries, and there's something, like, they often have such delight in them when they're about a particular subject. So if you are finding that the history books and the biographies are so dull, then go back to children's stories, and that can spark children's interest, right? Okay, that's cool. So that's the whole middle school idea. I think that's all I was going to say about that. All right. I'm drinking hot chocolate because I decided I deserve it today. It is so cold here. It's -5 degrees or something here in Cleveland, Ohio. Very unusual that we're having that polar vortex thing happening. Okay, kindergarten, when you have other kids. So really struggling. Somebody had submitted this question. Both Sarah and Lauren said, I'm really struggling with my 5-year-old and how to spend time with him or her when I'm doing main lesson blocks with the older kids. It's a huge challenge. So the very first thing I want to say is there was no kindergarten in the very first Waldorf school, and Steiner had no intention of starting one. There was eventually, after 1.5 years, because a teacher came to him and said she really wanted to take that on. But it's funny to me because the Waldorf kindergarten, you'll read all this language about a Waldorf kindergarten modeling. The classroom wants to model themselves after the home. And this is also true. I meant to say this about middle school. Cultivating lifelong learning and independent learners is way easier to do at home than it is in a classroom. We're in a much better position to do that. So, and then with the kindergarten at the other end of the spectrum, right? So, I just reread a really interesting article that's called, I should have brought it with me. It's, I think, the essentials, I'll put it in the comments, the essentials of early childhood education or something like that. And it's about the fact that the actual activities aren't the most important part of the kindergarten. Not even the rhythm, which I thought was so interesting. The most important parts of the kindergarten are creating the space, right? Which means the emotions within the space as well as the physical space. So that includes us, like our presence and how we are. So you want there to be plenty of opportunity and invitation for free play. You want the child to feel a part of the family. So Steiner's whole method was about cultivating community in the classroom. So our community and home is our family. So we want to do things together as much as we can. So include your 5-year-old with you throughout your day as much as possible. You can ask older children to do things with the younger children, right? The question that came from Sarah was that she said she wants to do all these wonderful, beeswax and drawing and painting activities with her 5-year-old, but she just can't seem to fit it in, and it ends up feeling like a chore. And so the thing that I want to say about that is then don't try to squeeze it in, because you don't want it to feel to anybody like a chore. And my suggestion to her was, well, what if you looked at it more as a once a week activity instead of every day, right? So maybe on Mondays, you bring a story and an activity for your 5-year-old. And then that's it. You want the 5-year-old, the kindergarten age child, the goal is to begin to see in their play evidence of a story, because they're beginning to picture in their minds the story that they hear. That's a huge skill for reading, actually. It's a pre-reading skill. So, yeah, so you just want to bring them along, and maybe your older child could be in charge of sharing the story, reading the story aloud, and engaging in some activity with your kindergartner. It's a really great idea to have to reset our minds, instead of thinking about that beautiful Waldorf classroom, right, with the perfect little light voice singy kindergarten teacher. Instead of that being what we want, they're trying to recreate what we have at home already, right? And so we want to know that what we're bringing to our child is rich and good. They're going to get so much out of just being in the house while you do main lessons with your older kids. You're not teaching them directly. You're not schooling them yet, but they are taking it in. They're taking in all that the story and the activities that you're doing with the older child. So we want just things within the family to be worthy of imitation, because that's how children learn at this age. And we want to be able to connect with them throughout the day. But sometimes with the kindergartner, we come together and share a couple of verses and songs. They go play while we do main lessons. We come back for lunch. Everybody goes and plays or does some independent reading. We come back for snack. Everybody goes outside. We come back for dinner. So that's the rhythm. The rhythm is like coming together, going apart, coming together, going apart. It doesn't have to be like this imposed activities planned just for the kindergarten age child. I hope that makes sense. All right, last category is the multiple ages. And this I get all the time. So I just wrote down, I really got like 4 different questions that were almost all exactly the same just in the past day or 2. And the question goes something like this: how do I Waldorf homeschool my children of multiple ages? One of the moms inside my Homeschool with Waldorf group said, basically homeschooling one child seems totally doable, but I have 5, right? So if you have more than one child, you know how hard this can be. Super simple overview is that there are 2 ways, right? Basic ways. There's a third, but I'm just going to talk about 2 right now. You can stack main lesson blocks each day. So you do the 2nd grade main lesson block and then the 4th grade, or however old your children are. Or you can combine blocks and do everybody together, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Think of yourself, and your own capacity. If you have a brand new baby, you don't have a huge capacity. If you have 5 children, you probably don't have a huge capacity. If you have 2 children and they're both in the grades, that's a little bit different. And your own energy level, and how needy your children are. I mean, it goes on and on. So we each have to figure this out for ourselves. And I always have said that what I learned about myself in homeschooling 3 kids was I don't have more than 2 main lesson blocks a day in me. right? I can't do it. I couldn't do 3 main lesson blocks on 3 different topics for 3 different grades in the same day. Not possible. So even 2 for me, I can't sustain it every block all year. I could do, what I ended up doing with my boys was 1 block I would do them together, and then the next, they're pretty close in age, but I'd do them together, and the next block I'd do 2 different blocks, and then together, and then 2 different blocks. And then when Lila came along, my youngest, I would combine blocks in a huge variety of ways. So here's one way to combine that I think works really well, and it is that you use the same story as the jumping off point. And how do you choose the story then if this approach or curriculum is written grade by grade, right? How do you choose the story? Well, through the year, you want to choose a topic and stories that relate to a block from each of the different children, right? So that you bring them at least one of the blocks that Steiner suggested for their age. Okay, so you share the story together, right? And then everybody could be, so on the first day, you're all together. Everybody is together for, you come together with a couple verses and songs, you share a story, and everybody does some artistic activity. Maybe it's a drawing into a main lesson book. Then the next day is when you are going to vary things. And you retell the story all together, but then when you sit down to do the writing portion or the summarizing, everybody might have something different. So a first grade child is, maybe just writing the title, right? But an older child is going to compose a longer piece. So that would be one way of combining everybody. It's sort of like combine for part of it and have independent focus for part of it, but it's also like parallel play because everybody's doing a similar activity at the same time, but it's just more, it's geared to being more appropriate to their whatever their age might be. Okay, so the other thing that I want to say about that is that build community. No, I know there was one more thing. Oh, that with multiple ages, you want to be sure that, I said this sort of, but you want to be sure that you're touching on some of the story curriculum that meets the child where they are, right? And another way to do that, if you're not doing their whole main lesson block around the stories, is to bring those, they're often called the soul stories. They're the stories like for a 4th grader, it's going to be Norse mythology. But if you haven't done a full-blown Norse mythology block, you can still bring those stories to the child just by reading them aloud, right? You could do it, I don't know if I'd read Norse myths right before bed, but you could do it in the afternoons. The child can, if the child's an independent reader, they can read some of the stories on their own to themselves. You can do it on the weekend. You can do it on Fridays. If that's going to be, if you homeschool 4 days a week, then Friday can be set aside for that. So you can be bringing them the stories in more ways than just in an organized main lesson block. So make the main lesson block work for the whole, right? However that looks when you're homeschooling multiple kids. Okay. Yeah, block combined, 1 block separate. That worked really well. That was such a good rhythm for us. And there were some that made more sense than others. When my boys were younger, they were in kind of similar places with math, and so a math block we would do together. But then as they got older, like my oldest is like a math guy, right? So he like took off, and then I wasn't doing them combined for math anymore. So it changes for sure. But I think we forget that we really, really, really want and need to make this work for us, right? We want to make it work for everybody. We don't want to just, I don't know, I think we somehow feel like we have to, or we have this understanding, okay, this is how it's going to be done, and that's how I'm supposed to do it, and I'm not doing it very well, but I don't know what else to do. So, all right, I have one more question over here, and then I have another thought about that I want to share. So what about one child in the grades and the little one who isn't? Yeah, so that's similar to the kindergarten conversation, where allow the younger one to be with you as much as he or she wants to, right? Or is willing to. They can snuggle right beside you. They can be at the table with you. They can even, you can give them their own main lesson book and they can color in it. You know, you just, you want to invite them to be part of the activity, right? Some people feel like, oh, my kindergartner is supposed to, you go play, like they shoo them away when they're doing the main lesson block with an older child. You do not need to do that. They'll, you know, wander off and play. Hopefully, not all children do, but many, most, for parts of it, and that's perfectly fine. But don't feel like you have to have like this incredibly fully planned kindergarten activity list for the 3.5-year-old and your main lesson block work with the older child, because you don't need to do that. You know, like I said, the rhythm can be the coming together and the going apart. So yeah, you want to make it work for you. Okay, so one really great term, hang on. I'm drinking hot chocolate. Sorry, getting chocolate all over me. Here in Ohio in the polar vortex. Okay, so there are all these really interesting conversations that are happening in the Waldorf movement, like the bigger Waldorf movement, right? You've heard me talk before, if you know me at all, about Waldorf myths and you know, things that we think are Waldorf, but like the gnomes, they aren't really Waldorf. I mean, at least they didn't come from Rudolf Steiner and the first Waldorf school. They were created by a Waldorf teacher in New York. So they're an American thing. And there's nothing wrong with them. Some people say don't use the gnomes for teaching math, but you know, it's just, but it's become so associated with Waldorf that we think, oh, that's what Waldorf is. And Waldorf is so much more about the foundational pieces than about those visuals that we associate with it. So I want to leave you with this really great term that is, now I forgot it already. Oh, responsible innovation. So it's the idea, and you know, Waldorf instructors in classrooms and trainers of Waldorf teachers all over the world are talking about this term right now, because it's the idea that, you know, in April will be this year, 2019, is the 100th anniversary of the first Waldorf school. And so it's the idea that we can be true to the Waldorf approach, right, without being dogmatic. We're not going to just follow it lockstep. We're going to make it work for the children in front of us. That's the whole idea, right? But we're also not going to just throw the whole approach out the window. We're going to responsibly innovate. We're going to decide what makes the most sense for children in 2019, for children in our families, and create a curriculum, right? We're going to customize that curriculum and create it to suit the needs of the children today and the children that we know and love and care about. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. I would love to have you join me inside Homeschool with Waldorf. It's my new mentorship community, and you can find out more at waldorfinspiredlearning.com/homeschool with Waldorf. And it's a monthly membership. There's some people here who are in it. It's been such an enriching experience for me. I had a group of founding members join in the fall, and now I've just opened it up. And I give inside of it one masterclass a month on a particular topic of Waldorf education, so that you can focus on one thing at a time. And this next month, February, it's language arts through the grades. super excited about that. And then we do monthly coaching calls like this. They're longer. This is a short version of it, where people, you know, submit questions, and I do some teaching around the questions, and you can watch come live or watch the replay. And then we also have a plan along, which is super fun. And this month's February's is coming up on Sunday. So if you're thinking about joining us, come on in. And we do those once a month too. Those are 90 minutes, and everybody gets their planning done for the month, and I'm there to help. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Stay warm wherever you are. Okay, bye.